When everything becomes affordable enough to win, no one wins. For decades, China's ascent appeared unstoppable. A colossal manufacturing powerhouse, built on efficiency so ruthless it resembled an art form. Cities that never slumbered pulsated with life. Assembly lines sparkled under the glow of countless lights throughout the night. Prices plummeted year after year like clockwork, driving Western competitors to abandon their efforts in despair. It was an extraordinary feat of scale, discipline, and meticulous planning. A civilization harnessing human labor into formidable economic strength. Yet beneath every miracle lies a hidden cost. The very strength of China, its unrivaled capacity to produce cheaper, faster, and larger quantities, has begun to pull it under. Welcome to the intricate narrative of modern finance, where money intertwines with power and history, and nothing is as straightforward as it appears. The saga of China reflects the evolution of contemporary capitalism pushed to its limits, a system that incentivizes growth at any price, even when such expenses jeopardize the future upon which it relies. What happens when the world's largest economy optimizes itself to the brink of exhaustion, when the quest for efficiency spirals into self-destruction? China thrived amidst this frenzy. But somewhere between the 10th new shopping mall and the 100th steel plant, the system began to overheat. What once appeared miraculous morphed into dependency. Local authorities required continuous growth to service debts incurred from building new factories. Thus, they constructed even more facilities. By 2015, China's steel production capabilities alone surpassed those of the rest of the world combined. Entire industrial zones churned out goods at a rate faster than global demand could absorb them. Prices started to decline, not due to innovation but out of desperation. Factories failed to decelerate their growth pace as profits dwindled. Instead, they accelerated production in hopes that volume would offset losses. Yet that did not materialize. It was during this tumultuous period that a new term emerged, borrowed from human experience but now describing an economic phenomenon. Involution. Involution is not merely about individuals working harder for diminishing returns. It refers specifically to companies producing greater quantities at lower costs, a competition that shifts from innovation-driven pursuits to sheer survival tactics. Historically, involution described Chinese students or workers exhausting themselves for fewer rewards. However, it had evolved into an industrial concept, a systemic process affecting entire sectors embroiled in a zero-sum struggle for market share where the only weapon left was price reduction. Solar panels, electric vehicles, batteries, all symbols of China's new economy, became battlegrounds in this fierce conflict. As these sectors engaged in relentless price wars, innovation took a back seat while efficiency became paramount. Industries began reshaping themselves around cost-cutting measures rather than breakthrough technologies or sustainable practices. This created an environment where corporations relentlessly pursued lower production expenses at any cost. The result was not just an economic transformation but also profound social implications. Workers found themselves trapped in cycles of overwork without adequate compensation or security. As the race intensified among corporations striving for market dominance through aggressive pricing strategies, the foundational elements of quality and durability began eroding. Now caught in this web of involution are different facets of Chinese manufacturing, from traditional industries like textiles and electronics to burgeoning sectors such as renewable energy technologies and electric vehicles, all seeking ways to navigate this precarious landscape while attempting to maintain relevance on the global stage amid fierce competition. In this intricate tapestry of modern economics and human endeavor lies the sobering realization that unchecked ambition can lead not only to prosperity but also perilous consequences. A stark reminder that sustainable success must balance growth with ethical considerations and long-term viability if societies are to thrive in harmony with their environments and one another. A multitude of enterprises, many of which enjoy government backing, have flooded the marketplace with indistinguishable products. Each company is engaged in a relentless battle to undercut the pricing of its rivals, resulting in a gradual erosion of profit margins across the board. This downward spiral persists as no one dares to withdraw from the fray. In an environment where production equates to legitimacy, a decrease in output signifies a loss of respectability. Consequently, this cycle perpetuates itself. Businesses continuously slash prices to maintain their market share, while competitors quickly adapt to keep pace. As profits dwindle, wages stagnate, and consumers initially revel in low prices, only to eventually realize that such cheap abundance comes at the expense of long-term prosperity. China has entered a phase characterized by industrial regression, a self-destructive cycle where efficiency devours profits and production undermines purpose. No longer is there a race toward innovation. Instead, it has devolved into a survival contest. In this grim arena, victory seems elusive for all participants. This is why Chinese solar panels are now available at prices below production costs. It explains the accumulation of electric vehicles waiting for buyers and the fierce competition among tech giants for dwindling domestic demand, even as their valuations plummet. Furthermore, despite record levels of exports, industrial profit margins are projected to decline by over 20% in 2024. To unravel this conundrum, we must journey back to the origins of China's economic phenomenon. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping stood before the Communist Party and shattered one of socialism's most entrenched taboos. He boldly proclaimed that wealth was not a source of shame but rather an act of patriotism. This declaration ignited one of history's most rapid economic transformations. When every player engages in a battle for the lowest price point, the only outcome is a further reduction in value. This scenario does not represent capitalism at its zenith. Rather, it depicts a form of capitalism that consumes itself from within. Ironically, China has encountered similar challenges before. During the early 2000s, rampant overproduction of coal and steel triggered plummeting prices, prompting Beijing to intervene forcefully by curtailing capacity, shuttering mines, consolidating factories, and laying off hundreds of thousands of workers. This process was akin to economic triage. The nation accepted short-term hardships to avert complete collapse. Now, 2 decades later, these issues have resurfaced once again, but they no longer afflict just individual industries. They threaten the entire growth model itself. Factories are shuttered not merely due to market demands but because political decisions dictate such outcomes. In China's complex political landscape, there exists little incentive for reducing production levels. Instead, there is encouragement for continuous activity, even if that activity results in circular movement without real progress. Behind closed doors, party officials are acutely aware of the troubling statistics. Declining profit margins, stagnant wages, and escalating debt levels loom large on their radar. Yet publicly, the narrative remains unchanged. Persist in production efforts, continue striving for growth, and maintain optimism in future possibilities. This approach reflects a broader concern. If this machine were to halt its relentless operation even momentarily, it risks revealing the fragile illusion upon which everything is built. By the 2020s, China's once impressive efficiency machine has morphed into something entirely different, an economy ensnared in an arms race against itself. As challenges mount and structural flaws become increasingly apparent, one must ponder what adjustments will be made to navigate through these turbulent waters while attempting to restore balance and purpose amidst chaos. The question remains whether genuine reform can emerge from within or if external pressures will ultimately dictate change when inertia becomes untenable. From the outside, it still appeared to be a grand success. The world witnessed an unprecedented surge in exports, gleaming new factories sprang up, and an astounding production line of electric vehicles and solar panels emerged, enough to supply entire continents. However, beneath the surface, profitability had plummeted significantly. What was once a miracle that generated wealth had now devolved into a mere mechanism for redistributing existing resources, growing thinner and more precarious with each passing year. This phenomenon is precisely what economists refer to as excess capacity. Yet in China, excess capacity is not seen as a deficiency. Rather, it is an integral part of the national strategy. Take solar energy as an illustrative example. In the year 2023 alone, China manufactured panels that exceeded global demand by more than double. Prices for these products tumbled by nearly 40% within just 12 months. Companies resorted to selling their goods below production costs to clear out inventory, leading to the bankruptcy of numerous smaller enterprises. Meanwhile, industry giants persisted in their manufacturing endeavors because local governments needed jobs, production levels, and the illusion of progress. Now let's turn our attention to electric vehicles. Over 100 Chinese electric vehicle brands are vying for a share of a shrinking domestic market. Each brand is compelled to lower prices to survive, prompting competitors to follow suit in a desperate bid for market share. The government has intervened with subsidies aimed at preventing widespread layoffs, but these financial handouts only perpetuate the cycle. Increased supply leads to decreased prices and shrinking profit margins. The outcome of this scenario is clear. In the first half of 2024, profits within China's industrial sector plummeted by over 20%, a stark decline despite high export levels. Factories are transporting more goods than ever before, yet reaping considerably lower profits from each transaction. The national economy may still be labeled as growing, but the quality of this growth is being eroded from within. Here lies the twist. Not all of this situation stems from mismanagement or oversight. A significant portion appears to be intentional strategy. The Chinese government has long mastered the art of weaponizing efficiency, leveraging subsidies strategically to sustain critical industries long enough to crush competition. This isn't merely about quarterly profits. It's about establishing strategic monopolies. In sectors such as solar panels, batteries, and electric vehicles, Beijing shows little concern for short-term losses. It seeks control over future markets. Local authorities are injecting billions into factories through low-interest loans and tax breaks so companies can sell products below cost. Not simply for survival, but specifically to eliminate rivals from the marketplace altogether. In an instant, farmers morphed into entrepreneurs. Rural areas evolved into bustling manufacturing hubs. Foreign investors, initially from Japan, then from the United States, followed by European nations, discovered a veritable goldmine. Inexpensive labor, limitless human resources, and a government eager to forge lucrative deals. China unveiled several special economic zones, small experimental cities where traditional rules were cast aside. The rationale behind this relentless tactic is merciless. Flood the market with products, overwhelm competitors until they falter, and then patiently await the fruits of such aggressive strategies. This methodical approach raises questions about sustainability and long-term viability, while also illustrating how state intervention can reshape entire industries with far-reaching implications for global markets. Western competitors, tied to private investors and short-term profit demands, find themselves unable to keep pace. They are starting to yield. As the global supply chain becomes increasingly reliant on production from China, the nation is positioned to emulate the tactics traditionally employed by monopolies, raising prices, dictating terms, and asserting dominance throughout the value chain. This strategy is not novel. It mirrors the approach China adopted in industries such as steel, rare earth metals, and shipbuilding. In each instance, the country artificially suppressed global prices until alternatives were nearly exhausted. However, the current scenario is unprecedented in its scale and impact. We are not dealing with ordinary industrial goods anymore, but rather with critical materials for the future: lithium batteries, photovoltaic cells, and electric drives, all of which serve as the lifeblood of a 21st century economy. Theoretically, this ploy is remarkably clever. In practice, it reveals significant vulnerabilities. There exists a limit to how long an empire can sustain losses, strategic or otherwise, before its foundational systems begin to deteriorate. When every sector anticipates government intervention to absorb its deficits, operational efficiency morphs into dependency. Companies shift their focus from innovating to competing for subsidies. Productivity transforms into a political issue. The distinction between national strategy and fiscal responsibility becomes increasingly blurred. This represents a hidden peril within China's ongoing price wars. These conflicts extend beyond mere economic skirmishes. They are akin to fiscal time bombs waiting to detonate. Each yuan allocated for maintaining factory operations today effectively incurs a debt against tomorrow's stability. Ultimately, someone must settle this bill. This reality imbues this iteration of what has been termed the Chinese trap with an added layer of tragedy. The same strategies that once facilitated China's market conquests now threaten to unravel its economy from within. Dominance achieved through sustained losses does not signify victory. Instead, it presages a deferred collapse. An empire is not felled merely by a decline in demand but rather by a failure of purpose. Herein lies the critical issue. Ambition has supplanted intent, a system that cannot afford to slow down because every tier relies on relentless momentum. Local authorities require operational factories to manage their debts effectively. State-owned banks depend on these manufacturing entities taking out loans to validate their financial statements. Meanwhile, central government officials need all these components functioning smoothly to maintain an illusion of full employment across the board. If any link in this intricate chain falters, the entire structure begins to crumble. Consequently, there is a collective tendency among stakeholders to perpetuate the notion that increased production equates to greater prosperity, even when reality suggests otherwise. In this precarious environment, maintaining appearances often takes precedence over genuine economic health and sustainability. As this complex web of interdependencies continues to tighten around China's growth narrative, it raises pressing questions about the long-term viability of such an approach and whether it can withstand inevitable shifts in the global landscape. The stakes have never been higher as both domestic and international observers watch closely for signs of strain within this seemingly robust economic model. The political dynamics of state capitalism reveal a fundamental principle. Production serves as a testament to control. When economic growth stalls, rather than retreating, the government opts to construct yet another factory. In times of declining prices, it responds by slashing them even further. When the private sector falters, local authorities step in with new loans and financial support. Each solution to an imbalance only seems to create another imbalance. Gone were centralized planning and bureaucratic red tape. Ideological purity tests became obsolete. There existed only one objective: attract capital and boost exports. And remarkably, this strategy worked beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Shenzhen, once a sleepy fishing village housing 30,000 residents, transformed into a vibrant metropolis with millions calling it home. Such actions may not appear irrational. Rather, they embody a survival instinct. The Chinese economy functions not merely as a wealth generator but also as a legitimacy engine. Within its social contract lies a crucial clause: sustain growth, and the populace will continue to place their faith in the system. This strategy proved effective when rising output translated into increasing incomes for many. However, it falters when growth results solely in deflationary pressures on goods. The paradox is stark. China's industrial overproduction keeps global inflation at bay while simultaneously eroding its own wages and reducing domestic demand. A nation that has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty now struggles to enhance the quality of life for those it has already helped. As it continues to export deflationary trends, the fragility of the global economic framework becomes increasingly apparent. Once, affordable Chinese goods were perceived as a boon in Western markets, helping to control inflation and filling store shelves with accessible options for the middle class. Yet now, this abundance translates into vulnerability, undermining local manufacturing capabilities in Western nations. Developing economies find themselves unable to establish their own industrial bases, while stagnation looms as the global cost of cheapness. China did not invent this trap. History itself has crafted it over centuries. This pattern is as ancient as empires themselves. The British coal industry once dominated global markets, slashing prices so drastically that even miners in Britain struggled to make ends meet. The remedy then was colonial expansion, seeking new markets capable of absorbing excess production. Japan's remarkable economic surge in the 1980s encountered similar obstacles: overproduction, deflationary spirals, and an aging population reluctant to spend money freely. And what about ancient Rome? Its decline did not stem solely from external invasions but from rampant overproduction within its borders. Vast estates managed by enslaved laborers extracted such copious amounts of grain that market prices plummeted, devastating small farmers who formed the backbone of the Republic. Rome essentially fueled its own imbalance through these practices. Every empire that achieves operational efficiency ultimately faces a common dilemma. Can it pause optimization long enough to ensure its survival? Chinese leaders are acutely aware of these historical lessons. That's precisely why they incessantly discuss transitioning towards rebalancing, shifting from an investment-driven growth model toward one focused on consumption and domestic demand. They recognize that sustainability requires a more nuanced approach that prioritizes equitable growth alongside continued expansion. In this ever-changing landscape, finding equilibrium between production capabilities and consumer needs becomes paramount for any thriving economy aiming to avoid the pitfalls that have beset previous powers throughout history. However, the process of rebalancing takes time, and time is the one resource that a growth-dependent system lacks. While Beijing strives to steer its economy toward innovation and consumerism, its provinces continue to construct new factories, expand infrastructure, and ramp up production. Actions driven by the incentives they face. It resembles trying to stick to a diet while the kitchen remains in full swing with preparations. Ironically, many of the products that China overproduces, such as solar panels, batteries, and electric vehicles, are precisely what the world needs for an energy transition. Yet, when prices plummet and companies face bankruptcy, even green revolutions can come to a standstill. The rest of the globe benefits from cheaper technologies at the expense of China's profitability. This cheap abundance turns into a trap, not because it fails to create wealth, but rather because it undermines the motivation to produce more. Within 2 decades, this winning formula spread like wildfire across the nation. Each province aspired for its share of prosperity. Every city yearned to replicate Shenzhen's miraculous rise. Local governments took on debt with fervor and embarked on ambitious construction projects. Highways snaked through landscapes, power plants sprang up like mushrooms after rain, and industrial parks flourished, all aimed at enticing more factories. Once this dynamic sets in, efficiency morphs from a virtue into a liability. The central issue facing China is not overly low productivity. Instead, it is excessively high productivity. It represents an empire that has mastered manufacturing yet lost its balance. A system capable of flooding the world with goods, but unable to generate sufficient demand to remain profitable. This situation reflects a cruel symmetry. The very force that propelled China's wealth, the cutthroat competition, now ensures that no one can afford long breaks if they wish to stay prosperous. This phenomenon occurs when growth becomes synonymous with identity, when production usurps purpose, and when progress is measured solely by how cheaply one can produce items that few truly need anymore. What we witness here is not development. It is an industrial-scale regression. Like any empire before it, China realizes that there is nothing more costly than extreme frugality. For when a system optimizes everything except for balance, ultimately, the only thing left to destroy is itself. This paradox highlights a critical moment in economic evolution where short-term gains overshadow long-term sustainability. As the landscape shifts beneath their feet, local governments are caught in a cycle of relentless production without regard for future demands or environmental ramifications. The pursuit of immediate rewards obscures the need for strategic foresight. Consequently, while innovation may be hailed as a goal on paper, the reality often reveals an underlying tension between old habits and new aspirations. This scenario raises pivotal questions about what true progress entails. Is it merely increasing output at any cost? Or should it encompass fostering sustainable practices that benefit both producers and consumers alike? Without addressing these fundamental issues within their economic framework, China risks entrenching itself further in this cycle of overproduction. A broader perspective reveals that every nation must consider how its actions reverberate across global markets and ecosystems. In seeking growth without restraint, there lies a danger of inadvertently stifling creativity and adaptability, 2 key ingredients necessary for genuine advancement in today's interconnected world. This ongoing struggle serves as a reminder that prosperity cannot be sustained through sheer volume alone. Instead, it requires an intricate dance between production capabilities and market realities. Only by acknowledging this delicate balance can nations hope to navigate toward a future where growth aligns harmoniously with both societal needs and environmental stewardship. By the dawn of the 21st century, China was no longer merely growing. It was undergoing an explosive transformation that changed the fabric of its society forevermore. As it navigated these tumultuous waters filled with boundless opportunity and hidden risks, questions lingered about sustainability and long-term viability in this relentless pursuit for supremacy on the global stage. He devoured global demand for everything: steel, coal, copper, oil. Every Western corporation eager to survive was migrating its production facilities overseas. If something could be manufactured, it inevitably ended up being produced in China. Yet behind this relentless expansion lay a perilous motivation: Success equated to being cheaper than all competitors. Local governments fiercely competed for factories by slashing land prices, taxes, and wages. Companies vied against one another by reducing margins, quality, and profits. Everyone chased after growth. No one aimed for sustainable development. It became a race to the bottom disguised as progress. For a while, this dynamic seemed inconsequential. The machinery of industry was too powerful to falter. Workers poured in from rural areas, millions each year willing to labor 12 hours a day for a fraction of what their Western counterparts earned. Factories operated around the clock without pause. Ports bustled with activity day and night. Western consumers reveled in their miracles. T-shirts priced at $5, iPhones available for $300, creating an illusion of abundance devoid of inflationary pressures.